All right, we are live. Today is Thursday, February 25th, and this is our weekly developer check-in meeting for Backdrop CMS. Before we get to the agenda, let's go around and do some quick introductions. My name is Jen Lampton. I'm joining from Oakland, California, where it's sunny and beautiful outside. And I'd like to turn it over to Tim.
My name is Tim Erickson, St. Paul Tim. I'm in Deerwood, Minnesota, and I frequently give the wildlife report outside my window, and it's just been a really boring day out there today. So, yeah, and a lot of things going on, diverse stuff in the community. I haven't been in the issue queue as much lately, but got a lot of backdrop projects I'm working on. Craig.
Hi, I'm Greg. Usually in Australia, but now joining from Greece lately. Haven't been as active as I used to be in the queue. I'm trying to catch up every week once I get motivated. But yeah, I'm constantly interested in anything related to Backdrop and any way that I can help. I'm trying to keep up with you guys and the rest of the community. Passing it on to Terry.
Hi, I'm Terry Erickson. I'm Tim's sister, which makes me St. Paul Terry. I'm a strategic improvement consultant, actually a structural engineer who did building design, but I'm hanging out with a lot of Scrum Masters these days. And what we're trying to do is learn from a lot of different industries on how to improve our industries. So I'm learning from you guys, and I'll try to share things as well.
Great, thanks, Terry. I'll go next.
Oh, yeah, Nate.
I'm Nate Lampton from Oakland, California. I'm a core committer, and I'm kind of joining the refrain here of, yeah, there's a lot happening that I'm having trouble keeping tabs on with the time available. There's a huge amount of work that's been going on, and we'll give you guys a brief update on that. And I'll try to keep myself from being the bottleneck on some of these items. So let's go to Justin.
Hi, I'm Justin Christopherson over in Denver, Colorado, and just help out with some infrastructure things here and there. Greg?
I think Peter's
I think Peter's.
Peter?
Oh,
okay.
Peter.
I'm Peter from Australia. Yeah, just checking in to see what's happening in Backdrop world, and lately I've been working on the Backdrop console module and doing some stuff there. So yeah, and that's it.
All right. I think that's everyone. So exciting news from the project management committee this week. There's been a lot of activity since Jack returned, which we are thrilled about. And Tim's been making a bunch of noise there too, trying to get us on our toes and back in action, which is great. This past week, we officially passed the vote to transfer the Backdrop trademark to the SF Software Freedom Conservancy to hold it for us. So I've bothered them a lot about it. I finally got an email back from a lawyer this week that said that she was going to send us the appropriate paperwork. So I think we are finally moving forward on that, which is great. We will write a blog post. Yeah.
Okay. I was going to say, let's clarify just a couple things about the current status for people who don't understand. Like,
sure. So Nate and I registered the trademark in our names 5 or so years ago when we originally got it. And it comes up for renewal, I think every 2 years or something. And 2 years ago, when it came up for renewal, we're like, should we figure out how to transfer this thing? Oh, that sounds hard. Skip. And then this year it came up for renewal again. And we're like, oh, well, now that we have the Conservancy to help us, we're just going to send it to them instead. So we started that process. And then we're like, hold on, we need an official PMC vote. We kicked it to the PMC. The PMC had questions. We kicked the questions back to the PMC, and everything sort of ground to a halt until we were able to get an answer from them on what it exactly meant to have the Software Freedom Conservancy hold our trademark. What happens if we have problems with the Conservancy in the future? All of that stuff. And we got some great answers back from them, which we will write a blog post to put it all in for anyone else in the community who's concerned about those same things, to just sort of explain what it means for them to be holding this on behalf of the community. And
can you clarify, there is no official nonprofit for Backdrop, is there right now?
Right.
So the Conservancy is acting as that.
Yeah, the Backdrop there is no Backdrop nonprofit organization. Instead, we have joined as a partner organization of the Conservancy, and it serves as both a fiscal and legal sponsor for us so that we don't have to figure out how to run a nonprofit. And they also specialize in software projects that use the GPL license, which is great because there are a whole bunch of other people who are all doing this exact same thing, and we get to leverage the sort of shared community knowledge at the Conservancy for how to handle this. So they hold trademarks for a lot of their other GPL community projects also. So hopefully we'll be able to get all of this documented in a more sensible location than the PMC issue queue going forward.
I was under the impression that in order to get to acquire a .org domain, you had to be a nonprofit. I was mistaken, right? Yeah.
No, yeah, anyone with $14 can have a .org.
Okay.
Unfortunately. All right. There's other stuff happening in the queue for the PMC. We don't have any official votes or announcements or anything, but I did want to let everybody know that we are working on all of the beginning of year stuff that we're supposed to be doing, and hopefully there will be more news coming soon. Also going on in the community this week, we have 3 new contributed project releases: the LDAP SSO module, the LDAP authentication module, and role watchdog. So continued thanks to all of our community members who are plugging in hours and churning out new modules for us, which is great. For Backdrop CMS websites, for the main website, backdropcms.org, we have this long outstanding issue for how to support more data in info files. I went to go take a look at that issue today to merge it and realize that there's some merge conflicts. So that just needs to be rebased. Doc Wilma, if you're watching this later, if you have a chance to rebase it, that's great. If you don't, I'm going to be doing some work on the backdropcms.org websites later on. And if you haven't gotten to it by the time I get back there, I might take a stab at untangling that pull request and getting it in there. I know you've been waiting a long time to get that done. We have a documentation website underway. Thank you, Peter, for taking that on. Current status with that, I believe, is that it is waiting the feeds import of documentation from the current backdropcms.org site. I did a bunch of work with feeds importers yesterday and hope to have a working version of that up on the events site later today, assuming I can get the time to wrap it up.
With regards to that, sorry, are we going to have new content types where the thing's going to be imported? It's going to be documentation pages?
Yeah, so I created a new content type and just pulled all of the book and doc content from backdropcms.org into there. We might not end up wanting to keep all of it, but that was the easiest way to get it all over. So I figured copying it all and then deleting or unpublishing the stuff we won't want will be easier than trying to pick and choose what we want. And then if we want, if Peter, you decide you want it all in with content types we already have, let me know, and that's easy to change later also.
Yeah, the main reason I was asking that is that they're going to have the CK editor enabled instead of the BU editor, right?
That would be my preference, but again, it's up to people who are working on documentation to make that call. So
okay, cool.
If they're in different content types, it'd be really easy to do that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's why I was asking. Thanks.
Okay. Next up is the events website for backdropcms.org. I think we have registration up, but donations are not working yet. I have an email into the Software Freedom Conservancy about how to handle transfer of funds, because last year they were able to get us set up with Eventbrite because they'd already used Eventbrite, but now that we want to do it directly on our website, it's going to be a little different. I haven't heard back from them yet. I'm a little concerned we might not hear back from them in time. So I've started setting up just a really quick implementation of PayPal Smart Buttons, which we can download from our PayPal account and stick on there. And hopefully when we hear back from them, it'll be really easy to just switch out our code for their code and continue moving forward. So I'm hoping that that's not going to be a problem, but at least we'll have something up right away. We can do some testing on it and make sure it's working. And then when we hear back from them, we can switch to using their PayPal account instead of ours.
So you think it's not a problem if we collect some money ourselves in the interim?
I think it is a problem. But I'm hoping that we'll hear back from them soon enough that it'll be like your money and my money and not like everyone community's money, and it'll be easy enough to just be like, here's, you know, $20 or $40 or whatever. But we'll see how that goes.
Okay. I just quickly, I don't know, Jen, if you even noticed this yet, but I was going to try and work on the site locally, and we still didn't have a database. And I think, Lars, you solved that problem. Is that right?
I saw it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think now, is that, are we automatically generating event sites, database, sanitized databases?
Should be working now, as far as I know. I need to get in there and check and make sure Cron's actually running it successfully, but when I tested it, it was working. We keep forgetting we have to make, we have to have the user have permissions to make the temporary database that's used in the process of performing the sanitation. So it like makes the database, and then it drops the database, and then it makes the database, and then it drops the database. And we forget to give it those permissions the last couple of times we did this. So I'll update the documentation on it.
Great.
Thank you, Peter and Justin, for working on that.
All right. I think that's it for random community related updates. I would like to turn it over to Nate to talk about Backdrop, the project itself.
Sure. So we always start with the current bug fix release. The next bug fix release will be 1.18.2. That will be coming out as soon as we accrue enough fixes that it warrants a release. There's no officially scheduled date. And we'll go through the items that we have here on the agenda as being higher priority. So the first item that we have is content, an editorial problem that could result in content loss while you're creating content. So it's kind of a bigger deal. The maximize button in CK editor, if you click it and then minimize the editor again, you cannot save the content on the page, and so your changes need to be re-entered. It's a big issue. It currently is easily reproducible on a new installation of Backdrop because the maximize button is present out of the box. So 4933 is the issue tracking that particular problem. There's no pull request yet. It's just been flagged as a problem. There's steps to reproduce it, but we haven't had a developer take a look at it yet. So it's probably JavaScript related. So if you have any front end skills, it's probably the area in which the problem exists. So that needs a developer to take a look at it. Next up, throw a warning if the max input vars PHP setting is not properly set, issue 3824. There is a pull request that needs review. There hasn't been any updates in a couple of weeks there, so I don't think I'll recap that yet again. This issue that got bumped from 1.18 into a later version, language names not translated into their native names, issue 4511. That one has been marked RTBC and is ready to go pretty much anytime. I really hope I'll get that merged in, so I won't have to tell you guys again next week that it's still RTBC, like I did last week. And lastly is, PHP 8 support, issue 4772. This issue has a pull request. It's still in progress, could use some additional testing to find out if we have everything working in PHP 8 completely. I haven't looked at that to see if it's passing all tests. Joseph, you were the originator of that. Is it passing all tests right now? Sorry to spring that on you. Also, just take a look. Let's see. It is passing all tests. That's great. Okay, but I think that we still have managed to find some areas where if you're manually testing, that there are some things that do not work. And I think more of that manual testing is would be appreciated on that issue. On the flip side of that, it also, if it's already passing tests, we could merge that as it is and then start iterating upon it for edge cases with PHP 8 support as we find them. Okay, and then lastly, menu active trail gets confused when the same path is used in menu links for multiple languages. A very confusing circumstance, but you'll know it when you see it. 4798 is the issue. It has a pull request that fixes the problem, but we need test coverage, automated test coverage on it. Jen, you think you have a way to solve that problem now, possibly with the test module? And so I think we're waiting on that at this point. Okay. I also want to just give a shout out that there are 12 RTBC issues that are currently ready to be committed. Thanks so much to our community members that have been putting that together. Extra shout out to Alan Mells and Indigo Zella, who have been doing this tag team thing where Alan Mells just finds some inconsistencies in the code and says, hey, we're not being consistent with something, and then makes a pull request, and then Indigo Zella and Alan just go back and forth and now have several RTBC issues just doing that tag team of cleanup. And we love cleanup issues. So thank you so much for your work there. Okay, 119. 119 is the next minor version of Backdrop. It has a scheduled release on May 15th, 2021. Feature freeze will be May 1st. And for minor versions, we have features that, well, we're adding features, not just fixing bugs. And each issue has an advocate that is kind of the point person to move that issue forward. So we'll go through the list here of issues that have advocates, some of which are present for this meeting, which is great. Expose the exposed file name. We'd like to make the file name exposed in the media library dialog, issue 3293. We have a pretty clear idea of what some of the problems are, but we don't have a clear idea of how to fix it. So this issue currently is marked needs work. It needs a developer to investigate options to see if there's ways that we can solve this problem. Also, kind of front end.
There's actually an update. Lampton filed a separate pull request to split out to solve the nested forms issue. And that pull request is not linked to that issue specifically, but you can see it. I think I've added a comment. Before my comment, there's a link to that PR, and I reviewed it. There's some breakages, but there was a stat, and I think Lampton needs some help with it. I can't remember. So yeah, so there's my last comment where I tested it, and then right above it is a link to that PR, which is not linked to the actual issue.
I see. I wondered what that comment was about because, yeah, okay, so there's a new pull request. Okay, great.
A separate pull request that only deals, it doesn't solve the actual, it doesn't add the exposed form. It just tries to what's the perfect? We'll just split it, move the nested forms so that we don't have nested forms in the markup.
Got it. So that would help get us halfway there, solve the problem, the underlying problem, so that we can actually add a feature.
And once we solve that, maybe we can apply the actual pull request that is linked after adapting it, I guess.
Great. Well, that's great that I saw that your feedback mostly said that stuff wasn't working quite right. But I'm curious if his approach could, be a route that we continue down to see if we can get that part working, then it might unblock the rest of this.
Yeah, the underlying problem of the nested forms is something that needs to be solved anyway.
Yeah, okay. Excellent. Thanks, Gregory. Next up is advanced caching, also known as supporting cache tags and the cache dynamic cache max age header, issue 4127. Joseph, you are the advocate for this. I'm not sure if you are able to speak to it.
It needs code review.
needs code review. Okay.
I've added a comment. I'm not
Oh.
sure if you had the chance to go through it. I recently had like a daily job related task that was involving cast tags, and I went through the Drupal documentation, and it mentioned a few things. So I'm asking a few questions as to whether our solution would also implement those things. I'm not sure if you saw.
I did not see that. I will go take a look at it.
Yeah, sure. No worries. These things that I'm asking can be follow-ups. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
I love Gregory saying, I don't have as much time in the issue queue as I usually do, and yet having updated every single one of the issues that we're talking about. Thank you for that, Gregory. Okay, next up is Jen, you're advocating for this issue, add a field has value visibility condition to layouts, issue 4728. Are there any updates this week?
Not since last, no, not since a while ago.
Okay, we'll move on then. Next up is adding support for relationships to layout contexts, issue 2134. Doc Wilmot is the advocate for this. It still just has a minor renaming task to it. Other than that, it appears to be ready to go. I saw that he posted a comment earlier, a couple days ago, that said something along the lines of, this is so simple, I think that there's plenty of time to do it, and that's why it's not getting done. So I totally understand that feeling there. But yeah, that issue doesn't need to be handled by Doc Wilmot alone. If anyone wants to come in and do that renaming, it's not a very large task to make the suggested changes. And I think that we know what changes we'd like to see. So that only needs a small amount of effort, and then that could be RTBC.
So Nate, I think sometimes people are reluctant to do that when somebody has put so much work into an issue. Maybe we should just mention, one, the etiquette for doing that, and two, the technical view. You just do a pull request on his pull request, or how exactly what is the process if somebody else were to help?
Yeah, ideally you create a pull request against their repo so they can review it and embed it into theirs. If they take long to respond, like if 2 weeks or more pass, then you can sort of like create a new pull request, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, I generally, I
based
think
off of theirs. Sorry, based off of theirs always. Yeah.
Yeah, the first approach is definitely the more polite way to go, that you basically ask the person to merge your changes into their existing pull request. It also makes things a little easier to track because there's only one pull request instead of two. However, I also don't want to discourage people from taking the existing pull request and making a completely new pull request that includes all of those changes with new changes on top of it. I also find that to be completely acceptable, and I don't really think that we should discourage that, because it is a way of moving a little bit faster. And
yeah,
just as long as that person's, the original author's pull or commits are still intact, so that they get some of the commit credit. Although we credit everyone no matter what. So
usually when I have to do that, I usually close the previous pull request and mark the new one as replacing it, so that committers don't get confused in the future as to which pull request is newer. But then you can mention that person and make sure they know that there's a new pull request. So if they want to do the same thing and get, add to what you've done to theirs, then they at least know that there's new action happening somewhere else.
Then I think you have a higher level of access, so everyone else in the community, unless they're a core committer or they have your level of access, cannot close other people's requests, I think.
But you can't.
No, I think only because you have to be, that's in the core code
Or what's in the
repository.
core queue. Oh, I shouldn't be doing that.
We're only people that have commit access can close pull requests. Yeah.
So how do you handle that? So if you type replaces X, does GitHub close both of them when the parent one gets merged? No.
No,
And
it stays open. Yeah.
Yeah, and you may see that I often may ask you or someone else to do that for me because I don't have that level of access to do it. But it's good that we have another person outside core committees that can actually do it for the rest of the community, because we often, not often, but sometimes we do need it.
Okay. Maybe we should make that an official responsibility and give it to some people other than me too.
Yeah, what I do as a core committer, and Peter, as you're a core committer too, it might not be bad to officially formalize this, that when I merge in one pull request on an issue, I'll also check the list of other related pull requests in the issue and make sure that they're all closed, because if one of them has been merged, then the other ones are usually cruft. But usually that happens. People take care of that already. It's kind of uncommon to actually have a large number of, even more than one pull request on an issue that isn't closed by the time that we merge it. Okay. Okay, next up is Gregory, the issue that you're advocating for, merging together the update pages for core modules, themes, and layouts into a single page, issue 2714. Any updates?
Yeah, and I appreciate the previous comments about being able to act on some of the things, no updates on that one. So this is where I say that I didn't have enough time. So I've been saying in the past couple of dev meetings, I'll get back to it, but I just can't find the time. The update as it were was that the feature itself was ready to be committed, but there was a breakage with the dashboard block with the updates, and I was considering to split that off onto a separate ticket. We'll see how it goes.
Okay. Let's see. Next up in the list here, we have this issue to change the word edit to configure in the URL for managing user roles, issue 4899. This one is RTBC. I don't think that there's anything more to be said on it since last week. It's just ready to go here as soon as possible. Peter, you had been advocating for that one, but now you've moved on to this new issue, 4966, allows server settings to be overridden. This is the first time that we've mentioned it during one of these meetings, so I would appreciate it if you could give us a summary of kind of what the problem is that you're solving and what approach you're using.
Yep. So with the settings.php file, you put in the database connection information, and then that's like when you're installing a site, that's what gets used. However, in certain situations, there's like a global server variable called backdrop settings, which if you set that and put database connection information into that variable, then basically your settings PHP file gets ignored and that variable's information gets used to connect to the database when you're installing a site. I think this is mainly used with, I know Lando uses it. So when you're installing a site using Lando, then you don't have to worry about setting up settings.php. It's all done for you based on because they have a set database name, database connection info. So they do it for you. And I think Greg mentioned that other hosting providers might do that as well. I'm not sure.
I think Pantheon uses it.
Yeah. Okay. So the issue is that I have with that is that it's great when it works and that it means less work for people when they're setting up a new site. But if you're wanting to debug something or test something or work on the code of setting up a database or whatever, basically if you're using a system that has that variable set, then you can't do anything about it. There's no way of using the settings.php file to do what you want to do. You can't sort of customize it. And I've had this problem with Lando. So the solution I had was just to add a new setting to settings.php, which is disabled by default. But if you enable it, then it means that the settings.php file will be used as the main source of information when installing a site, and it'll ignore the server variable. So it won't affect any existing sites. It won't affect any new sites unless people specifically enable it. And obviously they only do that if they know what they're doing. And that means that then you've got more power over what happens when you're installing a site, be it for debugging or whatever.
Interesting. I'll just throw it out here. So adding another setting to settings.php makes me a little nervous because I feel like some developers, when they first are introduced to Backdrop, it's like the one file they need to manually edit or one that they will look at frequently. And I think that sometimes they read through that file to see like what options are available to them. And sometimes, you know, the more options we have in there, the more confusing it can be. Like, what is this really saying? And I know that if I don't understand something, I just skip over it, which is what you'd probably do in this situation for something that is as like, you know, deeply server level as this is. So my brain goes to, can we somehow solve this without adding a new option? And so I think I'd like to ask, like, could you just unset that variable in settings.php and not introduce a new option? Like, because you could just unset server backdrop settings and then it just wouldn't exist anymore, and then yours would take precedence.
Yeah, so when I was trying to figure this out in Lando before I opened this issue, I tried all sorts of ways of disabling it, unsetting it, resetting it to just a blank string, all that sort of stuff, and nothing seemed to work. If there's ways that I haven't thought of that I'm missing, I'm open to that to figure out how to do it, because I'd very much like to get around that. But this, because in Backdrop's code, the section where this is that it pulls in all the information from settings.php, and then there's another chunk of code saying if this variable is set, then pull in these values and overwrite the ones from settings.php. So I've just added a little thing to the end saying if this value, like this variable, is set and the settings, the new setting that I've added is enabled, then do it. But otherwise, yeah. So I just had like a little extra if thing added there to make it happen or not. If there's a better way of doing it, I'm open to that. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll post a comment kind of with my thought here. That's what I'm
Peter, I understand that this is a blocker for the things that you mentioned for B, but my questions were coming from, so in GovCMS, we sort of like control what SaaS customers, which should not have certain liberties, via variables. And we expect those variables to not be able to be overridden in any way. This is why I was asking that. That's where I was coming from. That, like my last one or two comments was that, yeah, I understand the need for it, but are we sort of like making things harder for people like Pantheon or, you know, hosting companies that wanna lock certain things, and sort of like providing a loophole for people to just override things that they shouldn't?
Yeah, I guess it depends on what side of the coin you're looking at. Like from that point of view, it's like, yeah, you want to be able to lock stuff in and have it easy for the customer that they can't change stuff. From the other point of view, if you're a developer or just someone setting up a backdrop site using one of these situations, then it's like, it's your site, you're in control, you want to be able to do stuff. And if you can't, then it's frustrating. So I guess if there's a way to handle both, then great, but I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah, I don't have a solution for it. It's just I was just thinking out loud with regards to what, you know, my experiences from my day job. So, and maybe I'm thinking things wrong, and maybe this doesn't affect it, but that sounded like it was doing that. Yeah. Anyways.
Well, I posted a comment, Peter, and I'm not sure if you tried this explicitly, but yeah, if you could give it a shot if you haven't tried it. And maybe we can use that as like if you run into this situation, here's something you can try. If it works, then great. Then we can figure out what to do with this pull request. And if it doesn't work, well, then I guess that makes, I think, your request more valid. You know, if there's no other way to get around it, then we need to provide a way to get around it.
Okay, I'll take a look.
Okay. Anybody have anything else for 119 or just issues in general?
I just want to mention, we retweeted our note about advocacy for issues this week, and we got a reply from someone asking, well, it's great that you have this process to advocate for issues, but who's advocating against issues? Like, who's advocating for not adding stuff to core? and I had to smile. I feel like that does happen. It's not that we're suffering from the opposite. On the other hand, it is a good point that just because somebody advocates for an issue doesn't mean that it's going to get into core, and we need to think about how to. I mean, I think just like the way we handled it today, as an issue is brought up with a new advocate, to sort of talk about, like, do we really want to do this? Is this something that there's so?
Yeah,
anyways,
and an issue does have at least one other person has to confirm it as being like a valid feature request, although that's not a very high barrier because it can literally be anyone.
But if there is pushback from the community, we do have a process for advocating or escalating to the PMC for, like, does this go against our principles? So I think if it's serious enough, it's going to get stopped. A lot of times,
Right.
it's, you know, I don't know if it's that big a deal one way or the other. A lot of these issues are like things are bug fixes that just need to go into meter releases or features that everybody agrees on. So
yeah, I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, well, there was some talk initially about, I think at least the idea at one point was that any new issues that were going to be advocated for would be brought to the attention of the PMC. They wouldn't require their approval, but we'd at least let the PMC know so that they could object. I don't think we've really been doing that very well, but that might be something we want to just keep in mind, to just at least update the PMC. These are the issues being advocated for.
Yep.
Yeah, which
I'll create a PMC issue for that right now for 119. But I think we have been at least having the issue for each minor release lately.
Yeah, and I do wonder if, like, these meetings could serve that purpose, because we do cover every minor feature every single meeting, and there are 3 PMC members present right now, so that's, you know, almost half of them.
I think we're in pretty good shape as far as this goes. I'm not too worried about it. I just think it's worth keeping in mind.
Okay, let's move on to initiatives. We have 10 minutes. We have 3 initiatives. Initiatives are long-running objectives that aren't necessarily tied to a particular release. And we have 3 of them currently. One of them kind of a pseudo initiative, documentation improvements. Peter is taking the lead on that initiative. Do we have any updates, Peter, on documentation changes or improvements for this week?
I think just waiting on Jen to do the migration of documentation from the backdrop.cns.org site to the new docs.backdrop site. I think once that's done, then we can just look at the issue queue and see what other stuff people want to add or change. But I think once that's done, essentially the main bulk of the work is done, and then it's just work as usual on issue queue stuff.
Okay. Telemetry is the initiative to collect information about the way people are using Backdrop and report it into a centralized database on backdropcms.org. Tim, you are the initiative lead. Do we have any updates this week?
No, same as usual. Or I think we had a nice little summary last week and nothing new since then.
Okay. And lastly, theme development should not be necessary to use Backdrop. Luke McCormick is the initiative lead. He's not present today, but looks like there's an update here in the agenda saying we had a meeting last Tuesday to report on work done so far and to talk about how to wrap up this initiative. The meeting was recorded and available on YouTube. I assume this is under the Backdrop channel. Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
And so basically, Luke is putting together the final report on that initiative, and we're moving towards winding that one down as being a completed task.
Right. I'll just say quickly, the goals were a little bit ambiguous. Well, actually, there was some really clear goals, which was like to get at least 4 or 5 more ready-to-use themes. And there have been about 4 or 5 themes created since we started this initiative. So in that sense, we sort of accomplished at least that goal, which was explicitly stated at the beginning. But I think quickly we started morphing the project into other ambiguous goals. And the idea right now is to just sort of wrap things up and talk about what we've learned. And if there are new specific things that, emerge out of it, to form a new initiative with maybe more concrete goals. But in the meantime, releasing people from their current commitments so they can work on other things. So that's it.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, that's the end of the items that we have in the agenda. Do you guys have anything you guys would like to bring up as just general questions or anything that needs some attention? This is sometimes the most popular part of the meeting, so but other times it's quiet like this.
So I have a thing I'd like to ask about, but I don't know if anyone can help with this. I've been working on trying to improve the performance of the tests again.
Mm-hmm.
And an issue I made a while back was to reuse test prefixes, but I'm running into a problem where multiple test runners are selecting the same prefix. And I've tried putting in delays, and I've tried using locking, and nothing I can figure out is stopping them from doing this.
Yeah, I'm having a little bit of trouble understanding what you even mean by using the same prefixes.
So as part of the setup for a test, it creates a copy of the backdrop installation. And then at the end of the test, it deletes all the tables for that. And so what I was going to do is take at the beginning of a test, rather than creating a new database prefix, I look for a database prefix that's not being used by another test, and then get checksums for the cache tables and get checksums for the tables in that prefix and compare them. And if they're the same, I just don't do anything with them. And if they're different, then I do the whole dropping and recreating the table like is normally done. So that tables that aren't modified during a test run will just be left alone, and they can be just reused by the next test.
Interesting. Isn't that really pretty likely that tests would make changes though? I mean, at least some change to the database.
Not necessarily. Well, it depends. So because I'm checking each table, if they don't modify a table, then it doesn't need to be used for that. So for instance, if a test, like the node table, if a test doesn't create a new node, there's no reason to drop and recreate the node table.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Interesting. Huh. Okay. Well, yeah, I want to avoid any situation of like the order of the tests mattering, like if the tests, if you add a new test, suddenly you get different results. Yeah,
Right.
as long as we maintain the integrity of every test starts with a blank slate that is predictable. If there's optimizations you can put on top of that, as long as that's still the case, then that's
Right.
awesome.
Yeah, the problem is that so at the start of the setup process, I do a lock wait, and then during that, it picks the prefix, but it seems like the runners are just ignoring that and continuing on, and there are a lot of times where there's race conditions.
Yeah, I think that, I kind of think I understand what you're saying. So the run tests shell script runs tests in parallel.
Right.
And I think like a concurrency of 5 or something like that is what we're running on.
We're using 10.
10.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, if you make a lock, it should be used across all of them. So I don't know why that would end up running them all together. Okay, so that's where you're stuck. Do you have an issue for this?
Yes, it is issue 4353.
4353. Cool. Reuse test prefixes instead of rebuilding them. And great. Looks like Indigo Zala has been providing you some feedback there. Doc Wilmot did a long while back.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, it appears to be ignoring the locks, so I don't know what to do about that.
Okay, cool. If I get a chance, I'll add this to the agenda so that we at least look at it once a week.
Okay.
I'd like to be able to take a look at this if I have time.
I'd like to do, if you're done with that one, a couple quick just announcements.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. We are doing a virtual user group next Tuesday. I think 1 p.m. Pacific time in the US on command line tools. And Peter is going to be talking to us about B. And I'd like to think that the pending VUG has inspired him to, but he's doing a lot of work on B right now. So that's exciting. So come join us to talk about B or other command line tools next week and where they're going. We have in theory right now, 3 active projects for command line tools out there. And it'd be nice to maybe start talking about where to settle and which one. I've had newcomers say like they're confused by the different projects out there and which one should they use. Anyways, there's that. And also we are a little over 2 weeks away from Backdrop Live, which is supposed to be our big event. And I think progress got bogged down a bit for the last week or so. I'm going to try and really dig in this weekend and help move things forward. But at this stage, we still plan to go ahead. We have a lot of pre-existing work to build on, so I think we can still do it. But we're getting a little bit behind the curve. That's all.
Okay.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to say this. We will probably meet tomorrow if anybody, at least some of us. In fact, I'm just going to say I'll be available at 4:30 tomorrow afternoon, my time. That's 2:30 Pacific. That's when we've met before to talk about Backdrop Live. I don't know if anybody else can be there, but if you can, join me.
Okay. And they can probably get a hold of you on Zulip, right? The chat.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, we're at the top of the hour. Some of us have other obligations, so go ahead and say thank you guys all for watching. Thank you guys for joining. And yeah, we'll see you next week.